Welcome back to the channel, everybody. We're excited to see you here again and bring you another match where we're going to give you some interesting analysis. And this match took place at the last World Championships between Marcelo Garcia and this guy right here. But I think that there's some very interesting things to talk about in relation to the match itself. Before that, though, as we're sort of beginning to do, we want to chat a little bit about what's going on in the world of air hockey. We've got the 2023 World Air Hockey Championships coming up here in Houston. Going to be at the UH Hilton Hotel once again. And it's the 50th anniversary of air hockey sort of exploding on the scene. Now, air hockey was invented in 1969, but it didn't actually show up and get produced until about 72. But it was more in 73 that you started seeing tables showing up all over the country. So here we are 50 years later. And so that's sort of exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting. 50 years, that's a significant anniversary.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of thinking, it's a unique tournament, and air hockey is a unique sport right now because most sports are so old that the founders aren't around still playing. Right?
Yeah.
In air hockey, you still have players like Mark Robbins, Phil Arnold, who are still around, still playing.
Yeah.
50 years on. And so I think that's what's so cool about air hockey in general, and we're going to see it at this Worlds, right? It's kind of the older generation and the newer generation.
The oldest generation.
Right. Not only the
older,
but the oldest.
I'm an older generation now. Okay.
And so I was curious, being that you're at least the older generation, tell us something about air hockey and when you were up and coming, late 80s, early 90s, that, I don't know, would surprise my generation.
Your generation. Talking about my generation. The one thing you know about this, but maybe other folks don't know, is back in my day, when I was starting to play air hockey, I was 13, 14, 15 years old, there were 4, 5 maybe weeklies every week in Houston. You could go and play air hockey against so many different people at the arcades that were all over. If you wanted to be immersed in air hockey, it wasn't hard. And sort of reminds me a little bit about the experience that is happening right now in North Carolina. They've got the 3 weekly tournaments, maybe four. Yeah, four. Yeah. And so back in the 80s, in maybe early 90s, there was just so much. There was so much opportunity to play and so many different people to play against. There was just a lot of different people, a lot of different styles.
Yeah. A lot of variety.
There were a lot of variety.
Yeah. I was thinking about that today, actually, because Keith Fletcher, a player of your generation who's still playing, is in town today playing a few challenge matches. And I was watching, and he's playing with like the almost 80s classic like back defense, where his mallet's just not only back on his goal, but like offset to the right side. Right? And it seemed like yesterday, even though Austin ended up beating him, Austin Fernandez, and then today playing Chris Gibson, that defense is kind of giving them some fits, right? Because they're so unused to seeing...
Right, and that's interesting you bringing that up, because that sort of goes to some of the things we'll talk about in the match that we show you guys today, because Marcelo Garcia plays that sort of old-style defense. And when I started ascending and to become the best player back then, one of the reasons was because I had a very effective offense against that defense.
Right. Okay.
And Rob Hernandez, who was probably played that defense, as much as anyone, had a very difficult time blocking my shots because there are just so many openings in that specific defense. So yeah. So go ahead.
So I guess what I was saying, it sounds like there was a lot more variety back then,
right?
In the kinds of defenses, right, that might be thrown at you.
Sure, right? Sure, or and offense.
And offense,
there were lots of players that had really quirky types of shots that they would use. There wasn't as much cookie cutter, do the same drift and the same shot execution over and over and over. And I see a lot of that today, and maybe that's because the game is more refined. It's not as crude, but I also think that we've lost something because of it. We really don't see forehands. We don't see forehand attacks.
Yeah.
I mean, you might see a person throw a forehand here and there,
right,
but like I had actual forehand attacks. Bob Dubuisson had forehand attacks, and they were deadly. Others. Phil Arnold, can have a forehand attack, and I've seen him sometimes, pull it out. And not just that, but different drifts.
Right.
Like having 4 or 5 different types of setups to go to. You don't see that anymore in air hockey. I don't know. You guys maybe can tell us what you think, or maybe some reasons why. But another thing, I guess, related to the 50th anniversary and related to the idea of the oldest generation still competing or, trying their best to compete against the younger generation. Mark Robbins was just 16-0'd in a challenge match by Brandon DeMauro.
Yeah.
And that's a big statement. 16-0 is that's domination. And so I got to thinking and I got to talking about it with Mark and Phil. And it's interesting to me because when I look at air hockey, I do have the benefit of a long lens. They do too, right? They do as well. But I think that I have a different perspective because coming from being trained, somewhat in research in grad school, I look at statistics, and I look at numbers. And, if you look at air hockey, we've got maybe 100 to 200 active competitors, people that actively are trying to be good at this thing. And so we're super, super, super small. Which is fine. I'm okay with that. I love air hockey. I want it to grow. But when you have a sample size that small, you don't get a bell curve representation of what it would look like in a sport where you say have several 100,000 active competitors. So you will see interesting things like a 70-year-old competing with a 20-year-old and being competitive in some circumstances. You won't see that in other sports where there are large numbers of players. And to kind of demonstrate this, I looked at we got esports nowadays. Noah, my son, your little brother, he was top 1% in Fortnite. That sounds amazing, and it is amazing. That means he was top 15,000. He was in the top 15,000. Right. So, and then I looked at table tennis. I looked at the top 100 ranked players in table tennis. You don't see anybody or maybe just a couple barely over the age of 30. Most everybody is 18 to 23 or something like that. And the reason is because age-related decline. It's a real thing in sports. And it's a real thing in air hockey as well, whether we want to believe it or not. It just doesn't get demonstrated as much because we have a very, very small sample size.
And that's definitely something I've, I noticed playing doubles with you, for example, is I could tell that almost your higher level mental game was impeccable, right? The way you were kind of
course,
you were shaping these setups and these offensive, right? It made I was looking at it as wow, that's a great that makes sense. That's really smart. But every now and again you just pick a wrong shot that 10 years ago I don't think you would have, or just you kind of hit it and there's just no power.
The body doesn't do what the mind wants it to.
And I think another thing that I've actually thought about a lot with air hockey is because we have such a small sport, I don't know if enough people recognize how important the physical sort of in-shape aspect of air hockey is. I think a great example is my challenge match about a month ago with Connor, where I felt like I was playing reasonably enough, right? But he beat me,
right?
And I think a big factor was Connor's in really great shape,
right?
You know, I'm not in shape,
right?
And a lot of times we don't really see that in air hockey because the skill levels will just be so far apart. Like for example, Danny Hines, who I don't think would be the first to tell you he's not in shape,
right?
You know, he's going to be.
He still can be competitive because he's so great at the game,
right.
Well, and speaking of Danny in age-related decline, we had the match between Danny Hines and Mike Cummings, and Mike Cummings beat Danny. And so then somebody would then say, well, Mike's not a spring chicken, right? And Mike's doing really well. I think, though, that we have to remember that it's not just age, but it's also the years of mileage of air hockey on somebody.
Right.
So, you know, Danny doesn't have any cartilage left in one of his fingers because of all the years of air hockey. And my wrist, you know, is basically gets weak and locks up when I play more than a few games sometimes. Right. So, age is a factor, but also the wear and tear that is taking place with the sport on a person.
Who's your top five?
Top five at this World's. Well, I don't know for sure if Billy's coming. I think he adds a real wrinkle in there, and then we go back and say, well, look at Billy. Billy's an older player, and he can play super great.
Well, I was thinking about Vince too.
Right. Well, Vince is 40. That's not the same.
He's also not in great shape.
Fair enough,
which kind of sticks to my.
Fair enough.
He still is performing.
Yeah. Right. Well, but my point is that, of course, in a very small sample size, you're going to see all sorts of anomalies. But assuming that Billy does not compete, I would say the smart money is going to be Colin to win, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick you for second again. I'm going to pick Avery for third. I'll pick Vince for fourth. And for fifth, I'll go ahead and go with Munoz.
Okay.
Now, that could be switched up very easily in that top five. Right. Maybe other than Colin. I think he's got the strongest case for finishing in that spot. He is the strongest, I think, bet. But I think that for the other four guys, there could be some mix-ups there. It just depends on who wins on that day. Because, you've beaten Munoz and you've lost to Munoz. You've beaten Vince and you've lost to Vince, right? And so it could go any which way. Avery, I think, is sort of the wild card.
Yes.
He showed at the recent pro-only tournament that he's not the Avery of last year. He's made a leap, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
I'm excited. It should be a great 50th anniversary.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's take a look at this match.
Okay.
All right, stick around. Welcome back, everyone. We're excited to talk about this match that occurred at the 2022 World Air Hockey Championships between this gentleman here, Marcelo Garcia, originally from Venezuela, and my partner here,
Jacob Weissman.
And you're from Houston, Texas.
Yes, I am.
Let's see, and here you are. This is a really interesting match because Marcelo Garcia sort of took over in the winner's side of the tournament and defeated some big names, including Colin Cummings and Vince Sauceda.
and then he got a chance to play you. And here we're going to take a look at it. This is actually the third game. This footage is from Colin Cummings. Once again, thank you to Colin Cummings. Please go check out his YouTube channel. He's got a lot of great content there. So we're picking up here in the third game, and I remember that you and I talked quite a bit before this match because Marcelo had beaten Colin and Vince, and there was a lot of questions as to what exactly happened, and was it going to happen to you too? So for folks that aren't attuned to the subtle differences in offense and defense in air hockey, Marcelo's playing much more old school style defense. Now, it might not be old school for him. I don't think he learned it from the guys in the 80s. But he's holding his mallet very far back on his goal. And that was giving fits to Colin. I don't know how much of a fit it was giving to Vince. I don't recall. Do you?
Not really. I mean, it definitely gave Vince fits. I mean, he lost the match, but
right. But
I
could
remember
lose because
Vince,
of defense.
No, I remember Vince at this tournament, I think, telling me that he kept missing one of his straight shots, and the other one, like Marcelo, was just like charging at will.
Right.
And see that's what like the backbone of Marcelo's defense is here, is staying back there and
then charging
the straights.
And then on offense, there you just saw what Marcelo does really well, and I recall him doing it against Colin and Vince, was that cut from very far back.
Yeah.
So we talked before this match, brainstormed a little bit, talked about how to beat 80s style air hockey.
Yeah, and I mean, it's basically just time delay, straight shots. They come out, hit, banks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
See, I'm having a little difficulty here. I haven't been able to get my cross working as well as I would like.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, really, I think all you need is a cut.
6'2", so.
I think all you need is a cut. And that's fine. That's great. If your opponent does that and just sits there like that, wonderful. And you just do exactly what you just did, is go right back to that shot, move the puck over just a smidgen, and get that lane.
Right. It's a lot about kind of making sure you're hitting the cut at that wing.
Yeah.
You know? And then I remember also consciously just telling myself to be ready on defense, because he would probably be doing a lot of early release type stuff.
Right, like that, which is sort of a Robert Hernandez-esque, Albert Ortiz type early release off of the drift from far back, and you don't see it as much these days.
Mm-mm.
And there's that time delay. He goes ahead to charge, and then your bank, even though it was a powerful bank, it didn't need to be powerful.
Right.
You could have just tapped it in. It was sort of fortunate.
Good cut.
Yep, it's a great cut. It's nice because there's a good delay to it. But it's hard when you're trying to play a defense that is based primarily on charging.
Yeah.
And notice, Marcelo was moving forward again when that shot went in.
3-2. Play.
One of the things that I've preached for many, many years is that charges should be used sparingly.
Right.
If you've got a defense that's based on charging in many ways, you're opening yourself up to the ravages of a smart player.
Right. Right, I think as compared to, Colin, Vince, I had the benefit of this tournament of having, you, 10-time world champion, with your reign being built in large part of just beating this kind of defense.
Well, yeah, that defense, yeah.
5-3.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not claiming that. That I'm the smart guy in the room. I was saying a player that understands the weaknesses in that style of defense can just tear it apart.
Yeah. Well, and see, I think going back to talking about how, because I remember at the time being really frustrated that I couldn't get my cross working because it just looked so open.
Right, because he's sitting on the cut.
Right.
Yeah.
And so feeling like I did something wrong almost by not scoring that cross, but now looking at the match now, it seems like another kind of psychological thing that the Marcelo type defense can do is make you overthink your own game.
Right. So you start avoiding shooting your cut because you think he's sitting on it.
Right.
But he's really not.
Yeah. When in reality, if you hit that cut just right, it's going to go in unless he completely commits, and then you can just score the right wall under.
Right.
So I think that's one of the keys, is having that kind of fundamental straight that scores, and then not overthinking it, just pairing it with,
Right, and keep going back to it until you find the way it will score. Yeah, so you kind of like thinking, man, that cross must be open. Yeah, the way you're doing this is just it's just so difficult for him to choose. He's got to decide in that last split second whether it's going to be the cut or the right wall under.
Oh. I was slightly over. Yeah, you see, I was over the line there.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. That's going to be something that is going to be watched more
Very
and more
closely going forward. Yeah,
because of all the matches that not necessarily all the matches, but we saw it a lot in the World Finals in the playback. I'm surprised. Is Joe Kane the one of the refs here?
I think he's the line ref.
The line ref, yeah, because he missed that one, and he got a lot of good ones in the finals that he got a lot of good credit for.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes to show how hard it is to.
Oh, super hard
to see those just,
4-0.
It's unfortunate we don't have the first two games of this match.
Mm-hmm.
The first two games were very competitive. When I was still kind of trying to
figure out how to make this work,
the defense. And I actually remember, I think before game 3, I went and talked to you, and you kind of just reminded me of just really sticking with the game plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I used to love seeing people playing this style defense. It would always sort of excite me. It's not the best defense, and I'm not trying to, like, you know, berate anybody, but it's got some significant weaknesses.
Yeah. And you know, we saw Colin in his rematch with Marcelo this tournament. You know, exploiting those weaknesses.
Right,
well.
right. And
You know?
yeah, and if it's not something you've experienced a lot and don't have a lot of like a game plan, you know, I heard that Billy Stubbs gave sort of the lowdown to Colin before he played the rematch, and that Colin executed at least what Billy, you know, says he had told him to execute masterfully.
Yeah. Well, that's the mark of a, you know,
really great player,
great player, right? You can take advice and you know, an alternate game plan and just really execute it.
Yeah.
See Marcelo just saying, "I'm going to sit on that cut."
And that's please sit on the cut. Very excited to win that one, but that puts you into the finals.
Puts me into the finals.
Super exciting.
Yeah. But this tournament was an awesome run for Marcelo.
Absolutely, and he finished third, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's phenomenal. He was seeded 28th.
Yeah.
He's currently ranked 11th. So I mean, going from third to 11th, of, you know, the course of the year via all the different challenge matches is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Look at the, you know,
cut
for both of you guys.
Cut.
But cut was the answer.
Yeah.
So you have it. Sort of an interesting match to see a defensive style back from the 80s and early 90s that you don't really see anymore.
Yeah. Well, and the last thing I'll say is, you know, first round of this tournament, your stepbrother Max Silverstein went to Game 7 with Marcelo.
Right, 7-6, Game 7.
I think the reason is Max is from the 80s.
Right,
and
he
90s.
played against that style
that
defense.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it didn't. It was just he couldn't defend enough.
Yeah, he was.
But he was
the
scoring
defense.
just fine. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Air hockey's small, but it doesn't have to be. Please spread the word, and hopefully we'll show the world how great air hockey is.